So yeah, so one of the things that we've been trying to do since the start of MISP is to build a data format that kind of makes sense for what we're doing with MISP. And this is something that that has evolved over time, but something that we've done in the beginning, not really consciously, but something that we're trying to do more and more consciously, is to come up with a format or a design for the data structure that is as little complex as possible to convey the information that we want to convey. So, and instead of just planning ahead and building something big outright, go for something small and then grow it organically, the format. So that means that if we see the need for something new that we haven't thought of before, just add it on the fly when we get to that point. So we started out absolutely minimalistically with MISP, so it's a little bit hard to see. But our initial format, if anyone has been around in the MISP 1 days, I don't know if anyone has used MISP in MISP 1. Probably not, it was only a few organizations using it. Yeah, there we go, there's one person there. So basically, we had event object, as we know it today, so our main container for data. We had attributes and we had correlations, and this was basically it. So it was an event with a flat list of attributes with very few fields, with almost no distribution settings or anything fancy like that. We basically had a private flag and then not private. So not private means just distribute it to everyone. Private means it's only for you. And that was basically it what we had during those days. And this was something like 5 years ago. So quite a while ago. But then, as we've already talked about, or as Alexandre has presented, we've started reaching out to all these other communities. All these other users got on board. All these new features popped up. And we started seeing the need to increase this with more and more things. And over the past 5 years, it has been enhanced with all of these various features. But what we haven't done during any point in the lifecycle of MISP was to make any massive rehauls of the data model at one point. So it was always something where we added something to it. Sometimes we removed stuff. Sometimes we realized that something that we did was utterly stupid, and then we went back on that. And it's a natural process of growing your standard. Something that allowed us that this allowed us to do was to validate our design choices in very small portions. So it means that when we entered a new table for a new feature, we got a lot of feedback on that thing before we moved on to other design decisions. This means that we never had this feeling that we can't go back from any of the features that we've implemented, and it gave us a lot of flexibility. So if we compare it to the current data model of something that we're sharing, it's rather massive and rather complex. So just to clarify this, probably nobody besides me can see what's on here, so sorry about that, but to just give a quick explanation, we have the event object here, down here. And then you have all the connected things such as tags, taxonomies that the tags are derived from, galaxies. Then we have the objects that can contain attributes, proposals, and references to other things, some of the things that we've talked about. So this complexity has been raised gradually over time, quite a bit. So why bother with standardization effort that we're working on right now at all? We've been getting more and more requests from other vendors and other tool makers that they would like to integrate with us. So until now, in the beginning of MISP, the answer was, well, have a look at the code, have a look at what it outputs, and try to map to that, which was not exactly the most graceful way of handling it. Organizations struggled quite a bit with it, especially trying to navigate the jungle of PHP code that leads you to the various exports. So this was one of the main reasons. Another one was also getting validation on the format. So the moment that you present your entire format as a standard or as a draft of a standard, you start getting feedback on it, which is also a very useful tool for you to improve the format that you're using. Before I go on with this, something that I want to clarify is that we with MISP use our own format internally. We don't plan to change that. We do, however, encourage and we support the exchange through various specialized formats when it comes to feeding devices. We believe that the MISP format is great for exchanging data, but we don't believe, for example, that it's as great for feeding your IDS or something like that. So for that, we support specialized formats, and we convert to those. But again, going back to it, information exchange is what our aim is, and we believe that our format currently is doing quite okay with it. We had a look at what other things were out there while further enhancing MISP, while considering how we can map to other formats. Initially, all the rage was about OpenIOC back in 2012 and 2013. The only problem, of course, with that was that it's very focused on indicators, so it's very good at that, but it was quite limited to that scope. And then there is the most talked about exchange format out there right now, which is sticks. I mean, if anyone had ever had to implement anything with sticks, they probably know the pain that can go with. And sticks one especially was a massive beast with a long list of flaws at the time. And now it sticks to, we're kind of hoping that we can steer it in the right direction. So as Alexandros mentioned, we're part of Oasis. We're also working on the effort of improving Sticks2, and we fully intend to support it as an alternate exchange format. However, we also realize that there are shortcomings that will never allow us, for example, to fully map everything that we have in MISP to Sticks. So that means that our recommendation still is use the MISP format if you want to build something that can map one-to-one with the data that we have in there. For example, financial indicators and so on. You simply want to map those by Sticks. Moving on to this. So what are we doing with all of this now? So we have submitted IETF drafts documents for the MISP core format. So that is describing basically what I've shown before, the big blob of objects that are contained in the exchange in MISP, and also for the supporting formats that Alexandros talked about. So to quickly reiterate what both these formats are about. So the MISP core format is describing what an event, what an attribute, objects, tags, sharing groups, and so on actually look like. So if you want to interact with MISP or just build your own tool based on the same format, this is the one that you should be aiming for, the core format. If you want to build something for the support format, and this is probably the part that is used most from a standard perspective, where people build their own galaxies, their own taxonomies, and so on. So these are the JSON formats that we describe in those documents. So the first one, again, is if you want to see the format that is used to exchange information between MISPs, that's the one that you should use. Also, it is the format that you should expect when you're extracting data from MISP or when you want to feed MISP with data. So if you're building a tool that simply fetches data from MISP in the MISP format, that's the one that you need. Okay. One of the things that also popped up with the taxonomies and the galaxy was that we've had some other tool creators start using these formats in their own tools completely detached from MISP itself. So, for example, one of the ones that popped up was the galaxies being used by involved in OTX. It also makes complete sense. So they use those repositories, and for that, what we wanted to do is to make it easier on guys like them is to just have the whole standard described and how it works. Okay. One of the other things that popped up recently was the whole MISP objects and the object template. So this is something that we've talked about briefly before. Basically, besides supplying the software part of the objects and the implementation part and those templates that come with the software by default, we also want people to start creating their own templates. We will at one point integrate the creation of the templates directly into MISP, but we also want other communities and other tools to build similar objects and use it in their own tools. That will also make exchange easier for us if they have a similar way of describing things. So for that reason, we've described the format of the templates themselves. So if they want to create templates with any other tool, they can absolutely do that. Another interesting thing that is contained in this part of the standard is the vocabulary for relationships. Right now we use these to connect objects to attributes, objects to objects, but in the future we're going to use this repository of vocabularies also to reference galaxies to each other. So for example, if you have a threat actor, if you want to connect to ransomware, you can use this vocabulary for that too. So a little bit about the governance of the MISP standard. So basically, going back to governance model that Alexander's already shown, we get input from it from all over the place. So that can be GitHub, it can be trainings, presentations, and where we get feedback. Twitter, we've gotten quite a few ideas on how to enhance our standard via Twitter. And what we do with this is we add, remove, and shift priorities based on what we think makes sense. If anyone has been around for STIX1 and how the standard was developed and how it came to be, it was controlled completely by MITRE at the time, and they've also taken external input. What we'll try to resist is the urge to give in to as much vendor pressure as they have at the time, because maybe that was their biggest shortcoming as from an external point of view was that they caved very easily to some vendor pressure on doing things the way that a specific vendor wanted it, and it ended up being able to describe the same thing in too many ways in the end. So we're trying to stay clear of that. But ultimately what we're doing is a dictatorship, and we are firm believers that the only way that the development of such a format can happen successfully and in an agile way is through a dictatorship. And this brings us to the next point. Recently we've been, as mentioned, involved with the STIX2 effort with Oasis. And what we've noticed was that it was basically dragged down by this horribly cumbersome bureaucratic process with absolutely no flexibility. I mean, getting even minor changes in can take half a year or something like that. We've been trying to fight for a flag basically on an object for the past half a year. It's been so the missing hair patch on my hand comes from that. So it's something that we want to stay clear of. Another thing is that, and this has come up very often during the entire process of with STIX2, was that whenever something is, even by the community, deemed as a bad decision that was taken initially, there seems to be a very strong objection to going back and making changes to those previous consensus-based decisions. Because it was already agreed, we will not go back and not change it, even when the first implementations are starting to come in and people realize it was a mistake. So this is something that is very scary to us, and this is also a reason why we want to keep it in this dictatorship direction. And then again, another thing, and this is something that we're noticing, is vendors are pushing a lot of requirements that fit their products only, and it kind of excludes the use case for a lot of others, but as long as they can get that in, it's fine. And there's also and due to this, these vendors seem to be a little bit overrepresented sometimes with these efforts. They can put people full time on basically being present in these discussions and pushing hard for the ideas that they have. And in the end, it does turn into a dishonest dictatorship this way. So you have the appearance of an open process, but in reality, it's not what happens. So yeah. So, just to quickly recap the whole thing, we are a dictatorship, as said before, but our success basically is based on the feedback. So if we would have not taken any of the feedback that we've gotten into consideration, we would be still in that initial draft with almost nothing that we're sharing. So please make sure that you let us know if you have any ideas or if you want to make any changes. For the documents for the RFC, you can find them on GitHub, or you can also find, I didn't link to that, on the IETF website where we've published the drafts. But on GitHub, feel free to open any issues that you see with the documents themselves. Also, if you're implementing it and you're noticing that something is incorrect, we have this sentiment of the code being low. So we generally try to adopt the standards to that. But sometimes we make, or not sometimes, but quite often we make mistakes in that too. So if you find something in the standard that doesn't make sense to the actual implementation,
I found 2 mistakes and I opened them as issues in February on the RFC.
Okay, I didn't see those. So.
No, you see them.
I've seen those. Okay, interesting. So we can have a look at those and we can fix those. That's great. So yeah, indeed, that's what you should do. I mean, lately we've been a little bit swamped and overwhelmed, but we'll try to get around to all of them. So yeah, that's about it for the standard part. Does anyone have any questions about this part? Okay, so okay.